good afternoon to everyone. If in Singapore now, and if you're in the northeastern region like me, it's a rainy day, cold and rainy day, but happy to have you guys here, and I hope that today my presentation can perhaps provide some warmth to your heart. Okay, that's kind of lame. Okay, thanks. Hi everyone, my name is Dominic. As Chris mentioned, I'm part of IMDA's team that handles certification, as well as our new program, what we call the Data Protection Essentials. Okay, so just give me a second for the slides. Okay, great. Yeah, thanks. Sorry, I thought my slides was up when I was talking. All right, so today we're going to talk about the data protection essentials. And like what Chris mentioned, this is a new program, fresh out of the oven from the last COS that happened in March this year. Okay, and we just share about that. And I will talk a little bit as well as our Data Protection Trust, which is a certification to recognize organizations with accountable data protection practices. Okay, so first and foremost, before we dive into the details of the DPE as well as the trust mark, let me share with you IMDA's thinking on the trend of the future of data, right? So we are living in a day and age where we are going digital, we are living in a digital economy, you'll hear words like this, right? And more consumers are becoming aware of their rights under their privacy rights, right? So I'm not sure about you. Some of you may encounter customers who ask you questions like, hey, what are you doing with my data? Why are you collecting my NIRC? I thought you're not supposed to collect my NIRC. So we're dealing with consumers who are educated, who know, hey, they have rights under the PDPA when it comes to sharing their data. And they're starting to demand organizations that they deal with to have good data protection practices. And number two, digitalization. This is something that we've been talking about for quite some time, and digitalization has been accelerated, especially due to COVID, right? So we're still in the midst of COVID, it's not over yet. And more companies are starting to realize that, hey, it's either we digitalize or we will lose out on the race. The very fact that we're having this meeting today, we're having this presentation today, is a very, it's evidence, right, that we're heading in the direction where digitalization will become the norm. And as organizations digitalize, as they take in more data and they use and they harness the power of data, which is a good thing, which is encouraged by us, they need to show everybody, the regulators, the consumers, that they are able to create an environment of trust. And which leads me to my third point, increasing number of data breaches, right? So if you follow the news, we do hear that there are quite a few high key cases, data breach. Like what Chris mentioned earlier on, CSA reported that between 2019 and 2020, there was a 154% increase in ransomware attacks. And this trend is expected to increase. And for SMEs, right, I believe most of you are SMEs today. So let me share with you some statistics that will be relevant to you. In 2021, so last year, Cisco came out with a report where they mentioned that in Singapore, almost 40% of SMEs suffered a data breach, at least one data breach. And in the same report, when they interviewed the SMEs, right, so all SMEs, 68% mentioned that most likely that if they were to encounter a data breach, they will have to close shop, right? A major breach will end their business. All it takes is just one breach to end their business. And with the increase in data flow, we expect data breaches to continue to rise, right? Something that we of course we try to avoid. But the question now is, it's not a matter of if, but when for many organizations. And on this point, for those who are familiar with the PDPA, perhaps you are DPO, perhaps you are up to date with the news when it comes to privacy, you will know that the PDPA, there was a recent act amendment, well, it's not really recent, but last year, right? So there was a change, right, amendment to the PDPA. And there were a few key things that have been amended, including a mandatory breach notification, where if an organization suffers a data breach, they would need to report to the PDPC within 72 hours. Right? And the other one, which is an increase in financial penalty. So now the penalty for, if you were to suffer a breach, organizations that suffer a breach may have to fork out a financial penalty of at least 1 billion or 10% of the local annual turnover for the organization if your annual turnover exceeds 10 million, whichever is higher. So we expect the financial penalties to go up. However, having said all of the above three, right, My aim here today, besides telling you about VP and Trustmark, is to tell you that, look, data protection is something that if you take it seriously, it will set your business apart, right? So organizations who are able to demonstrate that they're investing in good data protection practices, they would stand out in the competition, right? It will become a competitive advantage for them. And so, yes, today, if you have to take home something besides our programs, remember, data protection is not just compliance, it is a business differentiator, which brings me to the next slide, my presentation here. So, what are the available IMDA initiatives that organizations can take on to support you in your data protection journey? Right. So, if you're newly incorporated SMEs, right? So, for those who are new, they can consider tapping on SME's Go Digital Start Digital Pack. Right? So this, if you're familiar, Start Digital Pack consists of simple preemptive solutions, right? Including encryption, backup to help safeguard your personal data and data loss from cyber incidents. Right? So if you're not really collecting personal data, you're new, you can consider going for this. Okay, so now that maybe a little bit more established in Singapore, business a little bit more established, you're starting to handle a little bit more of your customers' personal data. Then you can consider the Data Protection Essential Program, which I will talk about in details later, which provides a basic level of data protection and security practices to protect your customers' data and help you recover quickly from a data breach. And as you become more proficient in handling data, you become a little bit more confident in the way you handle data. You can then consider IMDA's data protection certifications as a way to demonstrate that you have high standards of accountable and responsible data protection practices in place. Right, so we will talk about the data protection trust part later. We do have other two certifications: the APAC Cross-Border Privacy Rules (CBPR), and as well as the Privacy Recognition for Processes (PRP). However, in the interest of time, I will not be touching on these two APAC certifications. But of course, if you'd like to find out more, feel free to visit our websites or feel free to ask me questions later. I can point you in the right direction to where you can find out more information on these two other certifications. Right, so without further ado, let's dive straight into our, oh, I'm sorry, there's supposed to be animation. I'm sorry about that. We'll dive right into our Data Protection Essentials program. Okay, so the DPE, Data Protection Essentials program, it is specifically designed to support SMEs, okay, small and medium enterprises, to acquire a basic level of data protection and security practices to protect your customers' personal data and to help your organization recover quickly if you were to suffer a data breach, right? And as part of our programs, we have developed it in such a way that SMEs can take on the right components that suits them. What do I mean about that? What do I mean about that, right? So for newly incorporated SMEs or SMEs that are already collecting and using personal data, some form of collection and use of personal data, under the DPE, you can consider going for security solutions. So these are encryption and backup solutions under the SME Go Digital Start Digital Pack under the cybersecurity category. Now, as SMEs collect and use personal data more intensively, they can tap on the one-stop professional service. They can tap on the one-stop professional service here, right? So right here, which consists of a one-time setup as well as a one-year retainer service. So the whole idea of this one-stop professional service, it is to help SMEs with a more comprehensive implementation of basic data protection and security practices through these two categories, the one-time setup as well as a one-year retainer service. Okay, let's talk a little bit about this one-stop professional service. So for SMEs that come to us, right, when they ask us, oh no, I'm not so sure what I need to do to acquire that basic level of data protection. Well, yes, there are some solutions in place, security solutions that I can tap on, but they would like to ask for a little bit more help. Then this is for you, this one-stop professional service. As I mentioned, there's a one-time setup, okay, which consists of the following 5 key areas. Okay, so accountability, where the service providers, IMDA's registered service providers, will look at areas such as governance and data protection and cybersecurity policies. Number 2, basic data security practices, where the service providers will help SMEs like yourself put in place basic data protection practices such as encryption and backup solutions to help you protect your customers' personal data and allow you to recover quickly in the event of a data breach. Number three, incident management. The service providers, they will work with you to ensure that you have in place an incident management plan to manage any data breach in a systematic manner, right? So, when something happens, when a breach happens, most of the time, okay, just to share my favorite quote, right? So whatever plans that you have in place, it will fail upon first contact with enemy, right? This is a famous quote by General Norman Schwarzkopf, say that, yeah, you can have all the best plans, but it will always fail with first contact with enemy. So the service providers will sit with you to ensure that whatever plans you have, it is well thought through. They will do some practice runs with you guys to ensure that when something happens, data breach happens, you guys will know what to do. The SMEs will know what to do and how to handle this data breach in a systematic manner. And that comes to number four, training and communication. Right. So this is very important. Where data protection and cyber awareness trainings are put in place, right, to foster a culture of personal data protection among your staff, your employees, or stakeholders. Okay, and as part of the one-time setup, there will be a 6-month review where the service providers will conduct desktop and phishing exercises to review the robustness of the practices that have been implemented after 6 months. Right, so everything's done at the 6-month mark. The service providers will come and then do a review, see whether whatever you have in place for the 6 months, it is still robust, is everything good to go. Okay, and on top of this one-time setup, there is a retainer service provided by our service providers that to ensure that the policies and practices are up to date. SMEs can tap on a 1-year retainer service provided by the service providers to conduct additional reviews and refreshes. So what are the benefits of the DPE? Right. So for SMEs that engage and implement the one-time setup, and as well as the retainer service, right? Minimum 1-year retainer service under the DPE professional service, you would enjoy, number one, recognition of your effort to be listed on IMDA's website and awarded the DPE logo as a recognition of your efforts to put in place basic data protection and security practices in place. And number two, this is very important, right? For those who have successfully implemented the professional services, the one-time setup, as well as the retainer service, in the event of a data breach under the PDPA, the PDPC, the commission, right, the regulator, may consider an organization's implementation of the DPE program as a mitigating factor. Right? So these are the two benefits of the DPE. And let's talk about cost. So for the professional service, right? So the one-time setup, the professional service, it starts from $2,300. Okay, so this is for the one-time setup, which includes the 6 months review. And don't worry, for this one-time setup, the grant support is available for eligible SMEs. For the retainer services, this cost will be advised by your service providers. So before you start work, right, do talk to your service providers. Let them know that yes, your intention is to enjoy the benefits, which requires you a one-time setup as well as a retainer service. Right, so SMEs, you can approach our registered service providers online on our website for a quotation to confirm the actual fee for your organization. Okay, and now that was the data protection essentials, helping SMEs to put in place basic data protection as well as security practices. Now, let me talk a little bit about the data protection trust fund, because if you look at the data protection trajectory, the journey, when we start from DPE, it should not end there. Organizations should not stop there. They should continue to advance and to strive for higher standards, to achieve higher standards. And this data protection trust fund is the next certification that organizations should strive for. Right? So data protection trust fund, as part of advancing Singapore's digital economy as a trusted data hub, the aim of the trust fund is to establish and recognize robust data governance standards to help your business increase competitive advantage and build trust with your clients. So under the data protection trust fund, we have 4 key objectives. Number one, through the trust fund, you can demonstrate compliance to the PDPA and then encourage a culture of accountability in your organization. Number two, with the trust fund, it will provide you a competitive advantage for your business And number three, it will boost consumers' confidence in how you manage their personal data. And last but not least, to enhance and promote consistency in data protection standards across sectors. So at the end of the day, what we aspire the trust mark to be is that it will be a gold standard for organizations to aspire towards when it comes to demonstrating good data protection practices and standards. The trust mark, it is enterprise-wide certification, valid for 3 years, where the assessors will validate the organization's data protection policies, processes, and practices. As of today, we have certified a total of 86 companies. I'm happy to say that, yes, we have certified a total of 86 companies. Naturally, your eyes will gravitate towards some of the bigger names like AIG, DBS. We have 2 of the 3 local banks certified in Singapore. We have 2 of the 3 major telcos, M1 and StarHub, certified as well. So these 86 certified organizations, they are protecting more than 69 million personal data and 37,000 employee data records, right? So, and we expect more companies to be certified in due course. And I'm also very happy to share that, in fact, more than half of our certified organizations are actually SMEs or non-profit organizations. So what that means is, as long as you are a private organization in Singapore, you want to demonstrate that, yes, you have good data protection standards, that you comply with the PDPA, etc., the data protection trust mark would be beneficial for your business. So benefits of the trust mark, right? Why would an organization go through a certification? Okay, so this is different from the DPE. DPE is a program. Somebody will come and help you, set up, okay, put in place the proper practices, the processes to achieve that basic level of data protection and security practices. But for the trust mark, it is a certification. So why would an organization go through this certification? Right. So these are the following benefits that our certified organizations have shared with us in our surveys, in our feedback, in our focus group. They shared that, hey, these are the benefits that they've enjoyed. First and foremost, all of the trust mark certified organizations agree on this major benefit, that it provides them the assurance. Okay, what do I mean by that? When we talk about assurance, right? This trust mark is developed based on the PDPA, as well as international benchmarks and best practices. And the requirements were developed together. IMDA developed the requirements together with the PDPCs, the regulators. So if you're meeting the requirements here, these requirements have been developed, right, again, by the PDPC. It means that you have ascertained, you have achieved high standards of data protection. That's why we talked about in compliance with the PDPA. And during this certification assessment, during the assessment process, if there are any gaps, any areas for improvement identified, the assessors will highlight to you. They will tell you that, okay, you have certain areas that you need some work, and they will share with you some best practices and share and allow you the chance to then improve yourself and to remediate your organization's data governance. So that's the biggest benefit. Number 2, it raises business competitiveness. We have SMEs. These are true stories, by the way. SMEs who are certified, who shared that because of the certification, it has given them that competitive advantage when it comes to securing contracts. Some of these SMEs, they have secured contracts with MNCs. And closer to home, in Singapore, especially for those in the ICT industry, you will start to see the trust mark appearing as a requirement in government tenders for ICT-related products and services. So having a trust mark will be something that will definitely help you in securing contracts, in securing deals, giving you the competitive advantage, the business advantage. And this leads me to the third point, strengthens customers' trust. Okay, let me tell you, this is again a true story. I had the opportunity to talk to some organizations that have encountered data breach, that were found to be liable by the PDPC, and then they come for the trust mark. We welcome them, right, as a way to improve themselves. And they shared this, very interesting, the thinking behind this is that, frankly speaking, for some of them, they are not so afraid of the financial penalty. It's true, let me tell you why, right? To them, they say that, okay, I mean, if let's not talk about 1 million, right? So if you see currently, if I am able to pay off my problem, right? Okay, fine, I suffer a data breach. And if I'm able to pay off my problem, then it's not really a big issue. However, what concerns them the most is not just a financial penalty, it is the reputational fallout, right? So you suffer a data breach, if it's a serious one, your name gets splashed all over the news, your stakeholders will start calling you and ask you, hey, what's going on? What's happening? Your customers will start to pull out and say that, I don't want to do business with you. I heard that my data has been sold on the dark web, etc., etc., etc. And then you have costly legal fees, crisis communications, etc., and all those kind of things. And so companies say that is something that worries them the most, the reputational fallout. So they came on the trust mark as a way to strengthen customers' trust. And number 4, having a trust mark would demonstrate accountability to regulators, not just in Singapore, but around the world. Having a certification in privacy and data protection is a clear demonstration of accountability to regulators. Closer to home, in Singapore's case, and this is very important, very useful. If you are a trust mark certified company and you suffer a data breach, what happens is that you can request from the PDPC an undertaking. Right? So for those who are familiar with the term undertaking, what it means is that if the undertaking has been granted by the PDPC, right, because you are able to show that you already have in place good practices, you have a very good remediation plan, just unfortunate that something happened, right? So we cannot guarantee that you are free 100% from data breaches, but because you're trust mark certified, systemically, policy-wise, you are okay. But along the way, something happened, human error, whatever, and they are prepared to offer you the undertaking that if you are able to carry out your remediation plan, your policies, to recover, right, to patch up the gaps, then it will be a very strong mitigating factor to you as an organization. In fact, they mentioned in lieu of any investigation, further investigation. And last but not least, increase overseas market access. The Data Protection Trust Mark is administered by the government of Singapore, right? So IMDA is backing this certification, and with it, it enjoys certain reputations that goes along with it. Predominantly quality control, right? Because administered by the government of Singapore, it enjoys a reputation of quality control, rule of law, that this certification is of a certain good standard, and it provides that assurance to overseas regulators, overseas business partners, as well as the customers. Right, so these are the 5 benefits. Okay, very briefly, certification process, right? So today, if you're here, you hear about this trust mark, you think that, hey, this trust mark is something relevant to me as an organization, right? The certification process is very straightforward. What you do is that you apply online at IMDA. There's a certification application fee. I'll talk about the cost later. Once your application has been approved, you go to stage 2, where you will appoint an assessor, an assessment body, to go through the assessment review, which goes to stage 3. With your identified assessor, your appointed assessor from our list of IMDA appointed assessment bodies, you will go through, or rather he will go through review your documents, right? It's documentation review, making sure that you have the right policies in place, the practices in place to meet the requirements of the Data Protection Trust Mark. And they will also conduct on-site assessments to make sure that, to find out how your policies are being practiced on the ground. And this is the part that if there are any gaps, any areas for improvement identified, they will share with you, okay, as an organization. And once the remediation is done, right, it's completed, they will submit an assessment report to IMDA, and if IMDA agrees with the recommendation, you will enjoy the Data Protection Trust Mark certification. So for those who want to know more about CBPR, PRP, the certification process is the same, right? Okay, let's talk about the cost. 2 fees involved. Number 1, application fee, $535. This is payable to IMDA. And if you're here today and you feel that the trust mark is something suitable, the CBPR, right, after this event, you find out more about the CBPR and you think that, hey, this CBPR is actually useful for me, especially if you do cross-border transfer of data, you can consider applying for both certification with a one-time application fee of $535. The second cost, assessment fee. This is payable to the assessment body of your choice, right? It depends largely on the size of the applicant, your company's size, annual revenue, size, number of branches, the complexity of operations, the amount of personal data that is handled by your organization. All these are contributing factors to the cost. So if you would like to have a better sensing of how much it will cost, you can actually approach our assessment bodies to ask for non-obligatory quotation. They will be able to provide you a rough idea of how much it will cost specific to your organization. So usually when I talk about this, the next question people always ask me is, any fund, any grant support for the trust mark? Yes, for those organizations who are keen to take on the trust mark, you can approach Enterprise Singapore and tap on the Enterprise Development Grant. As long as you're eligible, you can enjoy the grant support offered by under the EDG, which would cover the assessment fee payable to the assessment body, as well as any third-party consultancy. If you just need a little bit of help, you can engage a consultant, and yes, the EDG will cover the consultancy cost as well. Not everything, to a certain percentage. And yes, this is my last slide. Thank you for bearing with me for the last 20 plus minutes. So for you guys here, SMEs who may be not so confident in terms of your data protection standards, I encourage you to consider the Data Protection Essentials Program, right? Just visit our website. You can find the information there on where to find the security solutions, as well as contacting our service providers to engage their services. For SMEs here, for those attending here who are fairly confident in their standards, in their data protection standards, do consider our data protection certifications, the Data Protection Trust Mark, as well as the CBPR and PRP. So with this ends my presentation today.